Hello everybody, this is En route, and today I have another message for you. Now, this is a continuation and a part 2 of if you're a biological creature, you should watch this video. This is part 2 because I felt like the first part was good, but it was incomplete. So I have a few notes here, and I'm gonna go through them. Okay, so if you haven't watched the first video, you should watch the first video, because then some of the stuff that I say may not make sense. So I will link it down below, and alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. So, as biological creatures, because we live in very, easy climate control environments, we forget that we're also seasonal creatures, and we follow a cycle, and we're not always going to be what we are at one time of the year as we are in the other time of the year, and we're always changing, and our cells are always replacing themselves, and we're always becoming a different version of ourselves. And learning about the seasons and the cycles and even the moon cycles, it will help us to better understand ourselves as biological creatures. There's really, we should be probably running on a 13-month system, but we're not. That's why we have a leap year and all that stuff. But each month should be about the same as the moon cycle, 28 days, right? And if we went back to paying attention to the moon cycles, we'd be a lot more connected with agriculture, right? And even the cycle of a woman and her period and things like that, because we're biological creatures, right? So remembering these things and kind of, going back to the basics and understanding things that have been kind of forgotten is going to push us into a better direction, a healthier direction. And I'm not saying that everything from the past was perfect. There's a lot of great reasons why we have evolved past doing certain things, right? But in evolving so fast and so quickly, we have kind of severed our relationship with our biology and the environment and nature, which is where we actually come from. And so kind of helping ourselves to create a symbiotic way of how for ourselves, and that's probably not even the right word, but a symbiosis between us evolving but also remembering that we are biological creatures, right? So that's important. The cycles, the seasons, we continue to forget that because we can sometimes get an avocado all year round, right? But sometimes your body doesn't really need that avocado in December or January, and sometimes you're not giving yourself what it needs at certain times of year, right? Of the year. So that is something I wanted to also add into this little 2-part series of being a biological creature, and why it's so important to remember that as we continue to progress towards a more technologically advanced society. Okay? So that's my first point. Now, me talking about the seasons and the cycles, I'm moving into going back to Eden, right? That's what they say, going back to Eden. But I really wanted to talk about, and I've spoken about this before, and if you've watched my other videos, you've probably heard me talk about monocropping, monocrops, and why it's so harmful for the environment. Because when you have too much of one crop and too much of a bacteria or a disease or too much of a specific animal that likes to eat this crop, you run into a lot of problems because you have stopped nature. We're not naturally doing this anymore, because in nature you wouldn't have just fields, perfect rows and perfect fields of corn. That wouldn't happen. And the reason why we have to use so many chemicals is because you have too many of one thing put in the soil. And the problem with that, which is what a lot of people don't understand, and what as a gardener myself have come to realize, is that you need a symbiosis in the soil. And when you put just one crop, when it's just a homogeneous environment where there's no diversity, then that means that the soil doesn't get any diversity. And when the soil doesn't have any diversity, what do you do? Well, disease starts to grow, and things that you don't want more of start to grow, right? And then you hear about, oh, my whole crop was destroyed by blight, you know? And oh, my whole crop was destroyed by grasshoppers and these animals, right? Because you have too much of a concentrated area of a specific thing, and so it's going to attract those things easier, because the smell, whatever wants it, whatever likes it, is going to be able to find it easier because there's so much of it, right, in one area. And then disease is able to set in easier, right? But when you put a mixture of crops, because each crop, what people don't understand, add different things to the soil. Like, for instance, you plant beans or peas, right? You're adding nitrogen back into the soil. You know, you add in, I've grown tarragon, right? Tarragon, when you grow tarragon, it changes the texture and the consistency of the soil, and it keeps it even more moist. It helps the soil hold more water, which, you know, I'm sure a lot of people don't really know. It's not the most common knowledge, because you have to sit there and do the experiment yourself when you're growing and you're seeing how different plants react with the same soil. So I can be growing, you know, 10 different plants, and in each pot of soil, the consistency, the texture, the microbiome of the soil is completely different depending on what seed is growing out of it, because each plant offers its own benefits, right? Because plants and the soil are symbiotic as well. The soil gives the plants nutrients that it needs, and the plant adds to the soil something that it doesn't have either, right? And so and not every plant has everything, right? And some plants eat more than others. So when you have a symbiotic environment, every plant is able to fight better, because the soil has been able to provide the resources it needs to actually stay healthy, strong, resilient, and fight a lot of these, illnesses and diseases that plants get when there's just too many of the same plant around. And I understand mass production and mass farming to feed people, but as we can see, if we continue to do this long term, we're going to destroy vast amounts of acres of land. And then what are we going to do? And so how are we even thinking about the future? What is the future of farming if monocropping is the only way that we have decided to do it? Having more gardens that have, yes, a lot of the same thing, but maybe in different patches, maybe in different places, a symbiotic garden where each plant is adding and bringing back to the soil and going back and forth and doing different things. And the thing about it, I know this is a lot and complicated, but if we continue to monocrop, we're going to destroy the land with pesticides. Because the only way to monocrop properly and efficiently is to make it GMO, is to put pesticides. It's very difficult to monocrop and be organic. And so what I'm saying and what I'm, suggesting is that we, on a vast scale, start to make it so that gardening is like the gas station on the street. where it's just, there's so many, like, imagine just so many different farms with so many different varieties of food and tomatoes and whatever. You know, there's just so many, and that's what I'm saying. And the more people that are hands-on in this, the more varieties we're actually able to have, the more nutrient density and diversity we'll be able to have when more people are actually hands-on, because we only grow a certain amount of crops. Like, we only grow a certain amount of species of a specific crop, when there's thousands of species of tomatoes, right? But yet at the store you only find a few, and then maybe at Whole Foods you'll find some heirlooms or whatever, you know. But if you really want unique and different and diverse nutrients and food, you're gonna have to grow it yourself. But why is that? Why are we so... And I know, look, I'm not complaining. America's got a lot of variety. But when it comes to food and health quality, the quality of the food, we're not going to be able to sustain this. And so what do you tell people in 40 years when all of the farmland is full of chemicals that's destroying everything else, destroying your gut, destroying your plants, destroying your animals, because you can't feed it to the animals, and then and nothing grows. When people don't understand how bad it is, and how many people have lost their gardens because of gray zone poisoning, because they don't know how to properly do the hay, and so they're, you know, it stays in the animals, it goes right through the animals. And so, you know, when we don't consider these things, because no one thinks about these things really, because it's kind of boring, then we have problems like we're having now, where we're going to have a dependency on other countries to sustain our food supply, which is, it's not ideal at all, right? And so what I'm saying is that we need a mass exodus of new farmers to come out and put out patches of diverse, nutrient dense land farms that are growing all different kinds of things, because monocropping is not the way. We're not going to be able to sustain it. We're just not. And I don't know, I don't think, and why are we not thinking about the future? I'm not sure. Why are we not thinking like biological creatures? I'm not sure. Why are we not thinking more like gardens? I'm not sure, okay? Thinking more in like that agriculture, I'm not sure. When we depend on it, we rely on it just to survive. It is what is keeping us alive, and yet we put it almost at the bottom of everything. And then we juice ourselves with chemical foods and process this and process that, when really what we're missing, the depression that we're going through is caused by what we're missing in our food. And it will change so many things, you know. And I talked about, I've spoken about this before, where you have a population of inmates in a jail that are, you know, mentally just in another world, okay? Aggressive and just, it's like insane people, right? You feed them a well-balanced diet, right? And everybody's demeanor changes. And yes, I have said this before, but it is a very significant study, because it shows and it proves how much of an impact food has on an individual. So, yeah, what is the solution? Are we going to keep monocropping until there's nothing? And the problem with this is that when you can no longer grow food on the land, what happens? It dries up. It turns to dust. There's nothing you can do with it. Microbes cannot survive. And so then if your soil is dead, everything's dead. And plants can't survive without microbes. And you can grow a little plant, you can put some seeds in a little pot, and you try to put them outside, they're not going to grow to their full potential. They may not even produce fruit. And so what I'm saying is what are we doing? What are we doing? Why aren't we going in a more organic way, when we know that these chemicals are destroying like so much farmland? It doesn't make any sense, you know? But whatever, you know, that's that's what I'm going to say about that. Now, I was talking about healing and how long it takes to heal and things like that. When you think back in history, when people were going by a fortnight, a fortnight was like a day for these people because, things move slower. Our biology has not caught up with how fast technology is moving. Our biology is still what it was. Yes, we do have a more diverse food system. We have a more diverse population, and it's really hard to gauge certain things, right? But all I know is that no matter how far we have evolved past 200, 300 years, no matter how far we have evolved biologically, we have not caught up with our technological advancements and ability and capacity. We haven't biologically caught up with that, okay? And back in the day, people would take a year or two to recover from major injuries or things like that. It wouldn't be like, oh, okay, you get a cast on, whatever, and you go back to work in 6 months, right? People would recover, they would train, and they would get themselves back up, and it would take years, right? It would take years to recover. And the way that society is structured today, we move as though we're not biological creatures. We move as though we're machines. And I really wanted to make this point. Because, again, we are pushing ourselves in a way where we are shortening our lifespan. And this is a lot to juggle. But thinking about what it takes to recover from an injury, if you've been injured before, right? What it takes to recover, and let's maybe not even an injury, what it takes to recover from a death, what it takes to recover from some kind of depression, right? What it takes to recover from, people go through things, right? And so what I'm saying is that life doesn't allow for people to recover appropriately. That's why mental health is such a big deal right now, because society, the way that things are moving, it doesn't allow anybody time to genuinely recover, right? We're all kind of just running on fumes. And because of that, no one really has time to think about these things. No one really has time to think about these things, because what did I say in the first video? It's a rat race, and they're wanting to juice you of all your energy so that you don't have time to really think about the things you want to think about, right? And so then you're in a rat race and you're trying to let me have a side gig so I can make some money on the side so I can free myself and have more time to do whatever it is that I want to do. But society, specifically when you start from the bottom, it's very difficult, right, to afford to do certain things, right? I want to make something. Some people, they don't, they can't afford nails, right? Let alone a hammer or a drill to do things, right? Let's just say you just want to, do a DIY project, or you want to just do something on the side. Some people, they can't afford a hammer and nails. And then we expect them to be able to afford what is necessary to keep themselves healthy and strong and efficient. But the minute something bad happens, these people are screwed over. Their nutrition goes down. There's so many, there was this doctor that she was talking about this guy. I forgot the doctor's name. Maybe I'll put her name down. She's talking about this guy. He had his job was some kind of construction job, and to keep the costs low, he had a very, very mono and restricted diet, you know, rice and like oats and whatever, like just bland carbohydrates. And time had progressed, and he started to get these skin issues, and he started to eventually, several months later, go into a psychosis because he was trying to save money, and in doing that, he restricted his diet so much that he literally went into psychosis and had a niacin deficiency. And I mean, a B3 deficiency. And I find that so interesting because it's like, it doesn't take that long to create a deficiency in society, you know, especially when no one can afford gas or rent, you know, and then, you know, we expect things to be good for biological creatures, knowing what it takes to maintain and sustain a human being. And really, that was the point that I was trying to make with that. You know, and the thing about it is that most people are not rich. Most people are at a little bit lower socioeconomic. Most jobs pay what? On average, about $75,000 a year, right? You know, and then if you're middle class, what, you're making $100,000 to $300,000 a year, and then, you know, it goes up from there. But it's even when you're in middle class, these things can be hard, especially when you have, you know, a bigger mortgage and a giant car payment and things like that, because of the way society, you know, kind of tells us that we need to do things, right? And so you're spending, you know, a huge lump sum of your life on, you know, this mortgage and this car payment, and then the minute something happens, well, oh, holy crap, you know, you don't have that much time to recover and restore the resources that you lost, right? Because when rent's due, the mortgage is due, the car payment's due, electricity's due, everything's due. And so what then happens? Oh, well, let's cut down on food. What's the first thing that happens? Everybody cuts down on food, okay? And that's what happens, right? Our nutrition goes out the window when, you know, money gets low, you know? And so considering these things as biological creatures, you know, why aren't we, you know, really thinking more about this? You know, why aren't we doing more towards fixing this issue, right? And again, this is a loaded topic. It's a huge, huge subject to tackle, and it's not easy. It's very simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all. On my last point, we're going to talk about healthcare, right? Recently, there was a death, the murder of a CEO. And I don't think it's good that he was killed. I don't think it's good that he was murdered. But Luigi is a prime example of what happens when we turn a blind eye as leaders to the corruption that's going down below and still cashing that check. So what I'm saying is that even if he has no culpability to the corruption that was going on, you were so negligent to the point where you didn't even know what was going on. If we want to say he didn't know he was innocent, he didn't really know, right? But then it's like, what is it that they do if they don't actually know what is happening in the business, what is happening within that company, you know? And so it's just like, it's kind of like when so many people are getting denied for something that they desperately need, and people are losing their lives for it, their livelihoods, and their families are suffering because of it. Well, that doesn't seem very democratic. And when you try to get past what a democracy means as somebody that benefits from being in a this economy that we live in, which I forgot the word again, right? This economy that we live in, this when you're benefiting from that, but then you're acting as if you're, if you're acting inhumane, you're acting negligent, you're acting as if these people's lives don't matter, well then, do you, as leaders, can you really expect the people to look up to you and say, yes, I will follow this person blindly to my death? I mean, do you expect people to do that, really? And so, of course, there is going to be some kind of uprising against things that are completely unfair, because at the end of the day, the people that sit at the heads wouldn't accept that kind of stuff going to themselves, right? And so, and especially when some of these corporate heads, they've never had to truly have a deal with what financial suffering feels like. It's very difficult for them to reason or feel any empathy for people at the bottom. And it's unfortunate, but true. And so when your family is desperate in need of some kind of surgery or whatever, and you get denied because of whatever they decide, even though it's not cosmetic or whatever, it's perfectly in line with what it means to save someone's life, the surgery or whatever, and they still say no. Well, what is expected to happen when the government doesn't say, hey, this is wrong, and regulate the company? Well, then of course people would take things into their own hands. And I'm not saying it's right to kill anybody. But what I'm saying is that this is what happens when leaders don't do what they're supposed to do and become selfish and greedy and don't care. And at the end of the day, let's just say it was just pure negligence, and he had no idea that what was going on, the corruption going on within that company. It still proves the point that, these people don't care. They're not connected enough with what it is that they do to actually do something correctly, right? And it's just fun. It's just a paycheck for them. So that's all I'm going to say about that. This is part 2, and this is the last part about it. And I appreciate you guys watching. I want you to remember that you're a biological creature. We're not perfect. We ebb and flow. Things are in a cycle, in a season, and we should never forget that. So, this is En route, and I'm out.